What's up guys, welcome to Vintage Genetics, where it is all about classic bodybuilding. And today it's time for a chest workout in this gym called Sportcentrum Van Drunen, which is actually the gym that my brother goes to quite a lot. And it's an awesome gym. I used to train here for 7 years straight, so I basically built my foundation on most of the movements and exercises that you see here. However, this particular chest press, this decline chest press, that is a new addition to the line, and it feels quite amazing. Now, it always is nice when you visit a different gym and when you don't have all the equipment yourself, that you try out some different stuff. And here I'm training with my brother, doing some of those new machines, but also some classic ones that just feel quite amazing indeed. So anyway, we are starting out with the decline press, and as you guys know, I like to do warm-ups first before doing the actual working sets. Now, because this is the first exercise of the day and it's the chest movement, I really like to warm up with a bit more reps than usual because it's the first movement. On all the other movements, the warm-ups are usually around 5 reps, maybe even less. But here at the first few sets, I did a couple more reps just to make sure that the shoulders, the pecs, the triceps and all the joints are properly warmed up, because that is very important when training the chest. And you also want to simply get used to the movement when it's a new machine. You don't just want to do warm-ups of 5 reps at the very beginning, because you simply don't know, first of all, how much weight you can do, and you don't know the groove of the movement that you should be in to do the exercise perfectly, because bodybuilding is all about feeling the muscle. And if you look at my chest right there, you can see that even through the hoodie, you can see there's a good stretch, but also a very good contraction. And the contraction part here is very important, because unlike regular bench press or barbell press, for example, here the handles are actually converging towards each other, and that means the contraction is possible. And whenever the contraction is possible, you should maximize it. So since this is the first exercise of the day and I haven't done this exercise in a long while, of course I'm used to doing decline hammer strength movements, but this is a slightly different angle, slightly different motion, a different exercise. So the maximum amount of weight you can do for the working set is not yet determined. So what I'm doing then is, as you can see, the first few sets we added a plate of 20 kilos every single time, then of 15 kilos, and then of 10 kilos, and even then the set felt quite easy to finish. So then we added another 10, and this is the first working set that we're doing, and this is 13 reps. Normally I like to hit about 8 to 12 reps to make sure that I hit that rep range and I can hit a nice and heavy weight, but we have 13 reps here, so that's still acceptable as the first working set. And especially during the working set, it is very important to go very slow on the eccentric. Standardize your range of motion, because if you don't, the next time you would try to do heavier or more reps, you would simply use momentum, which is not standardized because it's different from the standard way of doing the exercise. And then you would not actually be stronger, you would simply move your body to move the weight more efficiently and use less effort in the muscle that you're actually training, which is the chest, and that is not what we want. So working sets are very different from the warm-ups, because during the working sets you actually always go to failure. So the first working set you go to failure with the maximum weight you can do of about a rep range of 8 to 12, and the second working set is with less weight, usually about 20% less weight, and then you're hitting the maximum amount of reps you can do again, and that should be in between 15 to 20 reps. But again, the range of motion, the form, the rep speed should all be standardized, so that the next time you hit the exact same parameters and try to beat that weight with one more rep, or do the same amount of reps with a bit more weight. And that is progressive overload, which is one of the pillars of building muscle mass, and that's what we want to do here. Now, this next movement has always been one of my favorites to do, the incline chest press on this machine with these free weights you add on top, and that just feels very amazing because the way you hit the muscle is very unique. Every single machine in every single gym is a bit different, but as you guys may know, the first 7 years of my bodybuilding career, I built my foundation and my strength, my muscle mass with these machines, so they feel very familiar. But at the same time, I also feel like that now, only now, I'm able to perform the exercise the correct way. And back then you simply moved the weight from A to B because you were sort of a beginner. I was like 13, 14 years old when I started, and I already did exactly these same machines back then. But now that I know exactly what I need to feel, they simply feel even better on the muscle. So what you really want to feel is the upper chest, because this is an incline chest press, and you don't want to feel it in the front delts. So what you really want to try and do is, first of all, retract the shoulder blades and push them against the bench so that you're actually in a safe position and press from there. But also keep your elbows tucked in as much as possible, redirecting the tension from the front delts to the pecs and a bit of the triceps, of course, because it's a compound movement, which means it's a multi-joint movement, which means the triceps and the chest is working with this exercise. But of course it's all about the chest, so you really want to focus on contracting the chest at the very top, which you will see in just a minute. You can actually see the literal contraction in the upper chest, and this is the first working set. And as you can also see, this first working set I actually underestimated my strength, which means that I was able to do more reps here than that 8 to 12 rep range. So that means that the next working set will be a heavier weight, because every time that you're at least able to hit 12 reps, in my opinion, the next set you do on that exercise should be a heavier weight. Not way heavier, but at least a bit heavier, to make sure that you hit the maximum mechanical tension that you can on that muscle. So here you can actually see how I'm getting into this bench. I'm really trying to retract my shoulder blades here, making sure my elbows are tucked down, as you can see right there, pushing myself against the bench behind me, the seat, and then press from that position and only use the chest. You can see it here, the contraction in the upper chest is there. I control the weight on the way down, making sure I hit a complete stretch, and then explosively push upwards until I reach a full contraction, then immediately go down. Because what you don't want to do is to lock out the elbows, because then the tension will go from the chest, from the muscle where you want it, towards the elbow joint. That is not what we want. So here I'm simply going to failure, not going beyond failure yet, because we're still going to do on intensifying technique in this workout, and that will otherwise not be able to do as many reps with if we go beyond failure at the first few exercises already. So that's always a balance you have to find for yourself. And I do have to admit, back in the day, every single exercise I did, I had a spotter to help me with like 3 or 4 extra force reps. But if you do that, what happens is that your body will accumulate systemic fatigue. And that is not the kind of fatigue you want. You want local fatigue in the muscle, because then the body will actually make that muscle stronger. But systemic fatigue will actually hinder recovery overall, will increase inflammation, and that's not good for building muscle in the long run. What you want is to get as much stimulus to the muscle as you can, and as little systemic fatigue as you can. And that's why I'm only doing 2 working sets per exercise, because some people like to do 4 or 5 working sets, which means going to failure 4 or 5 times per movement. But going to failure that many times is only adding a minimal amount of stimulus to the muscle, but a lot more fatigue to the body, which hinders recovery that I was just talking about. So it's always about finding that balance in between killing the muscle that you're training, but not overdoing it, so you can still recover from that workout, so you can actually get stronger the next time. And it's very important to get stronger as a bodybuilder. I know that we are not powerlifters or strongmen, but the more mechanical tension, which means the more weight you can use on the muscle, the more the signal and the more the impulse will be given to grow muscle. But only use a heavy weight with the correct form, like this. Go all the way down and all the way up without losing tension on the muscle, using maximum range of motion, and from that perfect form, only then should you use heavier weights. So this is the chest press, and the chest press is a flat angle, so you can compare it to a flat dumbbell press or a flat bench press, for example. So you're hitting the overall chest, top and bottom, pretty much the same. This is a different angle compared to the exercise we did before, the incline chest press, which hits mostly the upper pecs, and before that we did the decline press hitting the lower pecs. So as I mentioned in every single video pretty much, bodybuilding is all about hitting the muscle from as many angles as possible to maximize development throughout the entire muscle belly. So you should not be doing 4 chest movements hitting the exact same angle. You should be trying to hit different angles so you can actually develop all those muscle fibers throughout the entire muscle for big and full and filled muscles, like the pectoral muscles, the chest muscles. If you do a side chest, you don't just want the lower pecs to be great, you want the upper pecs to be great, to give off the illusion, but also the fact that your muscle is full and big, and that's what you want, especially for the chest. And for the back, it's the exact same thing. And this also has to do a lot with mind-muscle connection, because a lot of times people simply don't feel it in the muscle as much, and then they can't reach a full contraction which is needed to hit that full range of motion properly and know which exercises work for you. I had that problem for the back a very long time, so I had a very wide back because I was able to stretch out the back very easily, but the contraction part was more difficult because it was more difficult for me to actually get a proper mind-muscle connection in the back comparable to what I feel in the chest. However, ever since before, pretty much the off-season I had before the Romania Pro, that's when I started to learn about implementing these warm-ups and working sets and actually feeling the muscle the way that you're supposed to feel it, and that really improved my back in terms of thickness quite a lot, and it does the exact same for every other muscle group in the body. Now, this is the second working set on the chest press, and as I mentioned before, this is the intensifying technique that I'm using. So what is this? This is a cluster set, which means that your normal 8 or 10 rep max, that's the weight you put on this machine, and then you only do sets of 4 or 5 reps with 15 seconds in between every time until you reach a set that you can't hit that rep range with anymore. So I'm hitting 3 sets here of around 5 reps, and that's the maximum amount of sets I was able to do cleanly without using any momentum, and that to me is the best way to perform a cluster set, which allows you to do more reps with a weight that you normally wouldn't be able to do if you would do the reps back to back. So that puts more tension, more mechanical tension on the muscle as well over a longer period of time. Okay, now it's time for the flies, and it's the dumbbell flies, which means the stretch is emphasized and the contraction is still there, but there's a big difference in between the dumbbell flies and the cable flies, as I mentioned quite a lot as well, but it's very important to always keep in mind. So when doing the dumbbell flies, you want to go all the way down, but not all the way up. You can actually see it right here a lot better when the chest is revealed. That's what happens with the stretch and contraction. So when you go all the way down, you reach a maximum stretch in the chest, which is very beneficial because we already did 3 exercises pushing blood into the muscle, and the better the pump, the more blood is in the muscle that you're training, the better the stretch will be. But if you go all the way up, you will actually lose tension because then the dumbbell will be straight on your arm, and that puts tension on the elbow joint and the shoulder joint without putting it on the chest. So you can see here the striations in the chest existing because of the stretch, but when I go all the way up, I can still keep them there, I can still keep the contraction there, but I will do it with my own mind and not with the actual tension from the weight itself, and that is a very big difference. And of course, when you get a good pump, you have to see what you look like and see the fullness, which I'm very happy that it's still there. Fullness and conditioning is really my goal to keep intact in this rebound phase. A lot of bodybuilders, including myself, make the mistake by slowly eating more and more and not keeping as strict to the plan compared to the prep. Of course, you don't have to be as strict, but still, you have to keep a solid nutrition plan in place with only slightly more carbs and calories compared to usual, so you can actually keep your shape, so you can actually see where the improvements are being made. A lot of bodybuilders go 15 plus body fat percentage, which puts a layer of fat and water under the skin, over the muscle, which disables you from seeing the definition in the muscle. And sometimes you're like, well, my legs look bigger in the off season, but are they actually bigger? Because you can't actually see if it's muscle that's making them bigger, appear bigger, or there's actually a layer of fat and water which will disappear when in prep, and you're then disappointed by the size of the muscle you actually have. So also one tip that I have is, when you are done with the contest and you're in great shape, work on the weak points right away. And for me, for example, that's the legs, because the sooner that you build muscle and the longer that that muscle is on your body, the more you actually own that muscle. For example, if I train legs very hard for 2 months and I build a bit of muscle, they look a bit better. If I would then start a prep again, the first muscle that would disappear or flatten out or get less of a pump would be the legs, because that is the last muscle I gained. So it's always a rule: the last muscle that you gain in the off season is the first muscle to disappear during a prep. So the longer that you actually keep the muscle, the more likely it is that you will actually be able to show that muscle on stage, which is what we are all training for, at least when you are a competitive bodybuilder. Now, on these dumbbell flies, it is very important that if you go to failure, you always have a spotter, because you never know what can happen, and the rep range should never be below 8, because it is very risky, in my opinion, doing an isolation movement for the chest. You can even, because it's an isolation movement, other muscles might try to help you, including the biceps. And a classic bodybuilder from the golden era, Tom Platz, actually torn his bicep by doing dumbbell flies way too heavy and going beyond failure, for example, without a spotter, perhaps, and then you actually risk tearing muscles, which is not what we want, which is another reason why I put the flies at the very last of the workout, so that I go to failure on the chest and nothing else. And then it's time for the rope pushdown. We have finished all the chest movements. The chest is destroyed to be resurrected again stronger the next time, and now it is time for the triceps. And usually, well, pretty much always, I like to start out with a pushdown variation, and normally it's always the rope pushdown, which it is in this case as well, but it could also be a bar, straight bar pushdown, for example, as long as it's a pushdown that you really feel well in the triceps and nowhere else. Because all tricep movements should be an isolation movement, except for perhaps the close grip bench press, for example. But the first one should always be a pure isolation movement, so you can get blood in the muscle that you're training, pre-exhausted, and every other movement you do afterwards will be a lot safer, because the tension will be on the muscle way more compared to the joint, the elbow joint. Lots of people message me with the question, what can I do about my elbow tendonitis? And my number one tip is always to properly warm up first. It seems straightforward, it seems logical. Well, a lot of people, when they're doing the triceps, they like to start up with a skull crusher or a very heavy overhead extension exercise, but that puts a lot of pressure on the elbow joint, and the pressure will still be the same even if you do it at the second exercise, but the blood that is around that area and the more warmed up it is makes a big difference for the pain level and the amount of injury risk that can occur in that area. So it's very difficult to actually get blood in a joint or tendon area. So the more pump you get in the muscle that is attached to that tendon, the better it will be to prevent pain and injury, because that is not what we want. So I'm only doing one working set in this rope pushdown, as it's not a true exercise that I like to go all out at. I like to save that bit of power for the next tricep movements, and the next one will be an overhead movement to maximize the stretch on the muscle. As I mentioned before, the better the pump, the better the stretch will be, and right now we have a very good pump in the triceps, which makes this very movement very effective indeed. Okay, so this is quite an amazing machine, the overhead tricep extension. You don't have to do anything else but just sit on this seat, support your back against the bench behind you, and just focus on stretching those triceps behind your head and pushing up and back. One thing that a lot of people mess up is they don't only go upwards, but they try to actually push it forward as well. So you really want to think about pushing it up and back at the same time, because that minimizes the amount of pressure on the elbows and maximizes the amount of pressure and tension on the triceps. So this is the heaviest working set that I'm doing on the triceps, and it's very nice to then have a spotter to help you with that very last rep, so that you won't mess up your form on that last rep, because that actually causes all those elbow pains that we all drastically want to avoid. And this is a second working set. It's going to be a lighter weight, the same principle I always like to use. And for the triceps, it feels very amazing, because the better the pump is, the more you can actually feel it with mind-muscle connection in the triceps. And every time I go down, I feel that incredible stretch, and then you know that you're building muscle right on the spot. And also what you want to look out for is I'm going all the way down until I feel the maximum stretch, but I don't go all the way up, because you want that time on attention to be maximized, and the one way to lose tension here is by going all the way up. You might still feel a contraction in the triceps, but the tension will be caused by you contracting the tricep yourself and not by the actual weight, because that will be then resting on your elbow joint, and that is not what we are doing here. We want the tension to be on the triceps. Now Kane is doing this movement as well, and I told him to actually keep his elbows closer together and to push the handle up and back, because he is actually an example of someone who actually has some elbow trouble with some of these movements. And the one thing he said is that the pain in his elbow wasn't here, because one thing that happens is that if you perform it like this, you can't use as much weight as normal, which already reduces tension, but the form as well shifts the tension to the muscle, and that all prevents the pain in the elbow to exist. Okay, the last exercise of the day, the underhand tricep pushdown. Now my width that I'm holding this bar with is a bit wider than shoulder width, maybe just about shoulder width, but I really like that, because the wider the grip is, the more to the inside of the tricep you're working. So you're then working the long head and medial head very efficiently, which actually gives off the mass for your triceps, and that is what you want to do. And by the way, the tank tops that me and Kane are wearing are the new tank tops available on vintagegenetics.com. I am wearing the classic vintage oversized tank top, which gives a very deep chest opening, and Kane is wearing the classic scoop neck tank top, which sits a bit tighter around the body. So if you like an oversized fit for a tank top, which I personally love because then you can actually see the muscle in action, then you should get the tank top that I'm wearing. If you like it a bit more around the body, then get the one that Kane is wearing. They are very new and they are pretty awesome, to be honest. And I really want to thank you a whole lot for the incredible support. If you even go to the website to check out the old school vintage genetics clothing. But anyway, this is my first working set here. So what you want to really feel is when you go upwards, you want to feel that maximum stretch in the triceps, and you would feel it a bit more in the long head, and then explosively go downwards, making sure that you contract the tricep fully. And the moment that you can't fully contract the tricep anymore, that's when you know that you hit failure. So some people ask me as well, when do you know that you actually hit failure? Well, to me, failure is when you are not able to finish a complete rep on your own anymore. Even if you don't feel super fatigued from the exercise, because it's just a tricep movement, so you won't feel that fatigued from it. If you can't go all the way down anymore, that's when you hit failure. You write down the amount of weight and reps you did, and next time you simply try to beat yourself with one more rep, for example. That is the way of progressive overload. And I'm really happy with the way that the progress is going. I weigh around 117, 118 kilograms in the morning right now, and since conditioning is still holding, that is very good, because that means I'm 6 kilos over stage weight with a bit less conditioning, obviously, but still conditioning is on point for the stage that I'm in right now. And the better the conditioning is, the better insulin sensitivity will be, and the more efficient muscle that you will build. And also the reason I'm checking out the physique after the workout is backstage. The thing you usually do is you also train the chest. You do push-ups, you do some tricep extensions, you maybe do some side delts, maybe some biceps, but pretty much the upper body. I personally don't pump up the back or any other muscles. It's just mostly doing push-ups to pump up the entire upper body automatically. So that's pretty much a representation of what you look like on stage as well, if everything goes right. And promise me, this time fullness won't be the priority, it will be conditioning, I can tell you that. Anyway guys, I really want to thank you for watching, and don't forget to stay golden.